When Leonardo DiCaprio first strolls onto the set of The Steve Harvey Show, there is a buoyant atmosphere in the air. The audience anticipates humor, good-natured anecdotes, and perhaps some behind-the-scenes accounts of Hollywood. Steve himself is prepared to steer the conversation with his signature blend of warmth and wit. However, the moment Leonardo notices the crucifix on Steve's chest, something unspoken shifts. The mood, the energy, even the intention. What starts as a relaxed conversation for light entertainment quickly transforms into something far more profound. Because in the next few moments, Steve Harvey will not be the one leading the discussion. He'll be the one struggling to compose himself. What Leonardo shares will change everything. And it all commences with one startling request. May I tell you something I've never disclosed publicly before? Oh, and before we dive in, we'd love to know, where are you reading this from right now? We adore watching your reactions. The studio lighting dims a little as the crowd settles, the sense of anticipation palpable. The familiar jingle of Steve Harvey's theme song fades away as he walks across the stage in that iconic, half-smiling way. Holding his note cards, eyes filled with genuine kindness. Tonight feels different right from the outset, as though it's less a show and more a sacred space for something meaningful to unfold. In his opening remarks, Steve's voice resonates with respect. He introduces his guest not merely as a Hollywood celebrity, but as someone far rarer, a person whose spirit audiences connect with, even if they've never met him. The media calls him the nicest man in show business, Steve announces to cheers. The internet says he's the last truly good guy out there. Me? I say he's the purest example of kindness I've ever come across. The crowd erupts in applause as Leonardo DiCaprio steps on stage, dressed in his trademark understated wardrobe, dark jeans, a simple black shirt, and a plain blazer. No extravagance, just him. He offers a modest wave, a gentle smile, and a polite tilt of the head, visibly uneasy with so much attention. Taking a seat near Steve, the ambiance in the room morphs yet again. It becomes quieter, more earnest, less like an entertainment segment and more like a window into genuine emotion. There's no rush, no forced performance, just a shared moment. Leonardo thanks the audience softly, half laughing, half bashful, as he admits that he never quite adapts to such outpourings of admiration. "I'm simply someone trying my best," he says in a humble tone. Steve leans in with an encouraging grin. "That's exactly why people say you're special." They begin chatting, not so much about movie roles or red carpet rumors, but rather about humanity. The act of being kind, about going through life without constant defenses even when the world might give you every reason to remain guarded. Steve highlights Leonardo's reputation for generosity, the viral clips of him giving his seat to strangers on the subway, assisting crew members on film sets, donating portions of his salary to benefit stunt coordinators, camera teams, even makeup artists. Leonardo confirms all of it, but resists the notion that these are grand gestures. "I just think," he says quietly, "it's the right thing to do." He speaks with an understated wisdom, never theatrical, never self-serving, and the crowd is transfixed by every sentence. "Everybody's got their own struggles," he notes. "Sometimes the tiniest gesture can reshape someone's entire day." Steve nods, visibly touched. It's humbling to hear these words from an individual who has every justification to isolate himself in a world of fame and wealth, yet chooses sincerity and connection instead. The discussion touches on the paradox. How can someone who's achieved so much remain so balanced? Leonardo's response is quiet. "I've always been aware none of this is permanent," he says, speaking calmly. "I've lost a lot, and when you lose those you love, when life shakes you to your core, you realize that none of this fame or success places you above anyone else." He hesitates, gaze drifting, possibly lost in a memory. "I moved around a lot growing up," he continues. "Born in one place, raised in another. My dad left when I was young. My sister battled a serious illness. I lost my partner. We lost a child. And here I still am. Every day presents you with a choice. Let your pain harden you, or let it mold you into someone kinder." This statement falls over the audience like a heavy hush. People hold their breath, inwardly reflecting on their personal losses. Steve, deeply moved, touches the small cross around his neck without speaking for a few seconds, as though acknowledging something no one else can see. You speak of silence as if it's your longtime friend, he eventually says. Leonardo nods. It is. Silence has walked beside me for ages. But in those quiet moments, sometimes I find clarity. Steve's expression softens. Have you ever heard God in that silence? For the first time, Leonardo truly pauses, then looks Steve in the eyes. Yes, he admits. I believe in something greater than us. I've doubted it, left it, felt entirely alone. Yet, even in the darkest corners, I sense this presence, a calmness. Not always comforting, not always loud, but definitely there. Steve's hand closes on the cross. That's faith, he whispers. It can be unnamed, it can just be a feeling, but it's faith. Leonardo gazes at the crucifix, expression shifting, leaning in with a slight tremor, almost as if he's stepping off a cliff. Steve, he says in a lower, subdued voice, may I tell you something I've never spoken about publicly? Steve simply nods, struck speechless. Leonardo inhales, exhaling slowly. A few years ago, I went to a very dark place, he begins. I felt paralyzed, unable to eat or sleep, not even sure I wanted to continue. Everything in life felt hollow. The audience collectively stills, every pair of eyes locked on him. One night, he says, I was scrolling on my phone, just trying to distract myself from this emptiness. And I came upon a clip. It was you speaking about purpose, about faith, about how our pain isn't wasted. Steve's expression freezes. It wasn't only your words, Leonardo clarifies, but also your tone, the way you seemed to speak from the middle of your own trials. And you were wearing that same crucifix. Leonardo points to the one dangling from Steve's neck. I recall thinking, this man truly believes, maybe I can as well. Steve, stunned, touches the cross again with trembling fingers. I watched that clip over and over, Leonardo reveals in a hushed voice. The next day was the first time in weeks that I got out of bed. He leans back, the memory visibly weighing on him. I've never told a soul until now, but I've carried those words of yours with me from that day onward. Steve tries to speak, but is momentarily silenced by emotion. I was just talking from the heart, he finally manages, voice shaking. I had no idea. Leonardo gently places a hand over Steve's wrist. That's the beauty? You didn't need to know. You weren't trying to inspire me. You were just being authentic. And that rescued me. Steve's eyes shimmer with tears. The studio lights reflect off a single drop that escapes, tracing a path down his cheek. And that crucifix, Leonardo continues, speaking softly, is more than a necklace. It's a beacon. You view yourself as just a comedian with faith, but Steve, I see you as something else. Steve looks confused but curious. A minister in disguise, Leonardo suggests. And there's more I want to share with you. Something that could transform your life the same way you transformed mine. A hush swallows the studio. Even the equipment seems to hold its breath. Steve whispers, I'm listening. In that shared stillness, it no longer feels like a variety program. It's not a segment break or some dramatic lull for effect. It's an atmosphere that descends only when raw honesty arrives, naked and unafraid. Leonardo had leaned forward, asking permission to say something he'd never voiced before. The roles have reversed. Steve is now the student in the presence of a teacher he never knew he was. Leonardo sits back, adjusting slightly as if preparing to open a door that's been locked for far too long. The entire studio goes perfectly silent. No restless whispers, no shifting in seats. It's pure, rapt attention. He takes a measured breath, never glancing away from Steve, but the focus in his eyes looks distant. There was a season in my life, he starts, when I struggled to find any reason to get up in the morning. Steve remains very still, as if his whole being is leaning in. I lost people, Leonardo continues, not only through death, but through life itself. Circumstances, time, heartbreak, one after another. His tone is calm, almost too calm, each word echoing with weight. My daughter was stillborn, he says softly, and only a short while later, I lost Jennifer. She was home to me. He pauses, looking down briefly. I don't think I cried right away. Sometimes grief doesn't crash like a wave. It seeps in slowly, making you forget you're alive. The audience is entranced, some leaning forward, some turning inward, each person grappling privately with their own experiences of loss. I pressed on with work, Leonardo goes on, doing interviews, inhabiting roles because it was easier to hide behind a character than be myself, my shattered self. Steve's hand instinctively finds the crucifix on his chest, not in a showy way, but like a life raft. But eventually, Leonardo sighs, even the bustle outside couldn't block out the emptiness within. And there was one night, late, when that emptiness nearly won. Steve tilts his head, bracing for the confession. It was the middle of the night, Leonardo recalls. I hadn't slept for days. I didn't want food, company, didn't want anything. I was just sitting alone in the dark, consumed by an all-encompassing numbness. No prayers, no coherent thoughts. Just the moment after all thoughts have died. He goes quiet, and it feels like the entire set has paused. That's when I picked up my phone, he murmurs, absently scrolling, not sure what I was hoping to find. I guess I was trying not to feel. He inhales deeply. And I found a clip of you. Steve's eyes widen slightly in shock. You were on a stage, sharing about life's storms, about how God doesn't waste our hurt, about how sometimes the same force that breaks you might be the force that breaks you open. Steve nods slowly, as if recalling that moment. I'm not sure why I stopped scrolling, Leonardo admits, but I watched the entire thing, then I replayed it. His voice quavers, just a hint. You said, if you're still breathing, it means God's not finished with you yet. For some inexplicable reason, that line felt like someone finally saw me. Not the actor, not the tabloid figure, but the broken human being, like you recognize something in me. Steve exhales, placing his hand fully over the cross as if to steady himself. Leonardo leans forward, voice lowered to an intimate hush. I need you to know, Steve, that night I stood up, literally got onto my feet. Not because I was magically healed or suddenly had all the solutions, but because for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. And that spark was enough to make me move. Steve is deeply affected, his eyes brimming with tears he makes no effort to hide. Leonardo studies him gently, gratitude shining in his expression. I never planned to reveal this, he admits. But here, with you across from me, I feel I must. Steve's voice emerges after a beat, thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Leonardo replies softly. You already did, a long time ago. He nods at the crucifix. Seeing that cross and your authenticity, those things pointed me in the right direction at a moment I might not have survived. Steve's fingertips brush over the cross again, trembling almost imperceptibly. Over the days that followed, I watched your message multiple times, Leonardo continues. Not because it fixed me, but because it reminded me that healing doesn't come from having everything figured out. It comes from letting hope in. Throughout the studio, not a soul stirs. Many in the audience have tears in their eyes, and others appear to be in silent awe. Steve leans back, swallowing hard. You think you're just talking, Leonardo says, just clowning or just doing your job. But that night, you were saving somebody who couldn't stand on their own. Steve's eyes close briefly, overwhelmed. Then he opens them again, locking his gaze on Leonardo. The host can't conceal the shock and gratitude he's experiencing. The world sees you as a host, a comic, an inspirational personality, Leonardo goes on. I don't think that covers it. I see you as a minister in camouflage. Steve's eyes well up again, and he shakes his head as if unable to process it. You ever wonder why so many people are drawn to you? Leonardo asks softly. All the time, Steve confesses. Leonardo gives him a gentle, understanding smile. It's because people don't just hear your words, they feel your spirit. You carry something sacred, whether you realize it or not. Steve lets out a short, tearful laugh. I'm just another guy trying to make it through, he insists. Leonardo's smile grows more empathetic. Exactly, that's why it's real. You're not trying to be anyone you're not. And that resonates more deeply than any scripted sermon could. You connect with people you'll never meet. People in rooms like this, or on the other side of a screen, or alone in the darkness as I was. His tone quiets. I know it must be heavy sometimes, carrying that torch not knowing if it makes a difference. But I'm here to tell you, it does. And tonight, I have something else to tell you. Something that might affect you the way you affected me. Steve's expression is full of anticipation, his hand still lightly clutching the cross. I'm listening, he whispers. The set seems to shrink around them, drawing in closer. Leonardo inhales deeply. "I recall every phrase from your talk," he confesses, "and tonight I need to speak those words back to you, because there's a chance you've forgotten their true power." Steve's eyes flicker with curiosity. Leonardo sits up straighter. "I remember the lighting in that video. It wasn't perfect. It was a bit grainy. You stood on a stage with a microphone in one hand. Your other hand was right here," he indicates, pressing his own fingers against his chest, resting over that cross. Steve nods, memory awakening. "You were sharing about purpose," Leonardo says, "but it wasn't polished or rehearsed. It felt like you were wrestling with your own experiences in real time. You told the audience that pain has a unique voice and that when somebody who has battled hurt speaks, the words cut straight through the noise." He takes a breath, then locks eyes with Steve again. "Then you said something that has echoed in my head ever since. God doesn't always call the prepared, he prepares those he calls." Steve's lips part, and his hand drifts up to the crucifix. You went on, "God uses regular, everyday folks to work extraordinary wonders. Even if you think you're just doing stand-up, just paying bills, just hanging on till tomorrow, he might be using that very moment to transform someone else's life." Steve's entire posture changes as if the memory is rushing back. "You see," Leonardo continues, "it wasn't only the words themselves, but the way you believed them as you spoke them. That belief struck a chord in me." He pauses, gazing down at his hands for a moment. "At the time, I was drifting, drowning in my own grief, but when I heard you speak, saw you believe so earnestly, it stirred something in me." His eyes meet Steve's again. "Hope. Hope that maybe I wasn't overlooked, that even in my darkest night, there was a reason to keep breathing." Steve exhales audibly, as though releasing a weight he's carried for far too long. Leonardo offers him a gentle smile. And that's the beauty of a beacon. It just shines, not knowing exactly who's out there in the dark, needing its light. A thoughtful silence falls between them, dense with meaning. Finally, Steve's voice breaks it, low and hesitant. "Sometimes I wonder if any of what I do matters," he confesses. "All this hosting, comedy, motivational bits. Does it really change anything?" Leonardo tilts his head sympathetically. "It does. I'm living proof," he says without reservation. Steve releases a slight choked sound, somewhere between relief and disbelief. "I was just doing my best, man," he admits, "trying to get through my own hurts." "And that," Leonardo says earnestly, "is exactly what made it holy. You weren't trying to be a savior, you were just surviving." The words echo in the hushed atmosphere. Members of the audience sniffle or discreetly wipe tears. Others are still, absorbing every second. Steve lifts his gaze. "You mentioned something changed in you when you saw that clip," he says, voice tentative. "What exactly was it?" Leonardo contemplates. "Hope," he reiterates gently. "The belief that maybe the silence in my life wasn't the final word, that God might still have a purpose for me. Seeing you speak your truth while wearing that cross, it felt like more than just coincidence. It felt like a sign, a signal that even in the darkest places, light is still searching for a way in." With tears in his eyes, Steve nods. "It wasn't a coincidence." Leonardo's tone becomes soft, profound. "Exactly. Your testimony reminded me I wasn't forsaken, that my story wasn't done. And I've remembered exactly what you said, word for word, because it kept me afloat. Tonight, I realize maybe you need to hear it again, for yourself." Steve looks both astonished and vulnerable. "What did I say?" he asks. Leonardo squares his shoulders. "You said, sometimes you're not the one who needs saving. Sometimes you're the one doing the saving, without having any idea. You told your audience, you think you're just talking, but you're actually bearing witness." A hush envelops them. Steve's lips quiver, eyes moist. "You memorized all that?" he manages. Leonardo nods. "I had to," he confesses. "Your words were a lifeline." Steve's breath comes in uneven bursts, overwhelmed. Leonardo continues gently. "You carried me when I couldn't stand. Tonight I need to remind you of the power you possess, because maybe you've forgotten." Steve closes his eyes, tears escaping freely now. His voice is barely audible. "I'm trying to take it all in," he murmurs. Leonardo's gaze is warm, steady. "I hope you do," he replies, because not everyone gets to know the lives they've touched. You deserve to understand the difference you've made. The stage remains engulfed in a reverent quiet. Steve finally opens his eyes, gazing at Leonardo with immense gratitude and awe. "No one's ever told me anything like this," he manages. "I always thought I was just delivering a routine, cracking jokes, or speaking off the cuff." Leonardo shakes his head firmly. "You were doing much more than that. You were providing hope. Deliberately or accidentally, it doesn't matter." A handful of people in the studio audience gently dab at their faces. No one dares to break the hush with applause. It feels almost sacred. Steve exhales. "So, you're saying you believe I've got a calling?" he asks, his voice trembling slightly. Leonardo meets his gaze. "I know you do," he answers, "and I suspect you've sensed it too. Why else would you speak about faith and resilience with such conviction?" Steve draws in a shaky breath. "I guess I never framed it like that," he admits. Leonardo's expression softens. "That's understandable," he murmurs, "but that doesn't change what it really is." He glances at the cross again. "And I think that symbol around your neck isn't just a piece of jewelry, Steve. It's a continuous declaration, whether you realize it or not." Steve's head bows momentarily, and he whispers, "Maybe it is." Leonardo then looks up, squaring his shoulders as if preparing to reveal something big. "That's why, tonight," he says, voice clear, "I need to tell you something that might alter your path the same way you altered mine." Steve lifts his gaze, eyes brimming with cautious anticipation. Leonardo nods as though reassuring him. "You see, you gave me a sermon without knowing it," he says. "Now it's time for me to give one back to you." Steve appears both humbled and anxious. "I don't know if I'm ready," he confesses. A gentle smile curves Leonardo's lips. "You were ready the moment you first wore that cross on television, speaking words that saved someone's life, even if you didn't realize what you were doing." The tension in the air is nearly tangible. The studio feels like it's trembling on the edge of revelation. "That's the kind of unexpected grace we're dealing with here," Leonardo continues. "God doesn't always pick the perfect or the powerful. He picks those who've been hurt, who've been scarred, because they can speak to other wounded souls in a language empathy can understand." Steve's chest rises as he inhales, fighting back more tears, his shoulders shaking almost imperceptibly. Suddenly, the host seems overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. He stands up abruptly, one hand clutching the cross, the other half raised as if to steady himself against an invisible current. Leonardo rises too, meeting him halfway. They stand face to face in front of everyone, but it feels like they're the only two people in the room. "Why me?" Steve blurts, his voice rough with emotion. Out of everyone he could have used, why pick me? Leonardo meets his gaze unwaveringly. "I'll tell you," he responds quietly. He doesn't speak right away, letting the silence guide them. Then, gently, "Because the ones with scars understand how to heal others with scars." Steve's expression crumples, and he leans in, searching Leonardo's face for answers. The latter's voice is unwavering. "You're not the loudest voice out there. You're not the most trained in ministry. But that's precisely why you can reach hearts that might ignore the polished or the scripted." Steve says nothing, tears simply falling. "You're not perfect, Steve," Leonardo states softly. "And that's your power. You're relatable, flawed, open about your struggles. That's the language real people understand, because it's their language too." Steve exhales in a trembling gasp, as though some weight is melting away. Leonardo's eyes never leave his. "You don't need a pulpit," Leonardo murmurs. "You have this stage. You don't need a sermon, you have your genuine story. You don't need a robe, you have this cross." The audience is silent, fully present in the intimacy of the moment. Steve finally manages a shaky laugh, tears mingling with a fragile grin. "I can't believe I'm hearing this from you," he says. Leonardo half smiles, equally emotional. "I know, neither can I." They remain standing there, side by side, two men who have each felt pain and are now discovering grace in real time. Slowly, Steve lowers himself back into his chair, Leonardo following suit. The crowd still doesn't applaud. Something about this exchange feels more significant than mere entertainment. Steve stares out at the audience for a second, then back at Leonardo, eyes searching. "So, you think I'm some kind of minister?" he asks, not quite believing the words he's uttering. Leonardo replies without hesitation. "I do. An undercover one, if you like. I think your comedy is the disguise, and your stage is your platform. Steve's shoulders shake in a quiet laugh sob. A minister in a suit, he says, half to himself, half to Leonardo. Exactly, Leonardo affirms. And there's one more thing. His gaze intensifies, and the atmosphere constricts again, focusing only on the two of them. Tonight, I need to offer you the same grace you gave me. Remind you of words you once said, so you don't forget. Steve seems braced for impact, heart pounding. Go on, he whispers. Leonardo's voice lowers to a near-reverent hush, as if reciting sacred text. God doesn't always use the mighty or the flawless, he quotes. Sometimes he picks the ones who are broken, the ones overlooked by the world, because they know how to speak to broken people in a way that the strong never could. Steve's eyes widen, and he lets out a soft cry, hand clamped over his mouth as emotion overwhelms him. You said that, Leonardo insists gently, and I never forgot. There's an immediate hush in the entire building, like everyone is collectively exhaling, but doing so in reverent silence. Leonardo continues, unwavering. You don't need a pulpit to deliver a message. You don't need a temple or a scriptural degree. Sometimes your very pain becomes your ministry, and your comedy, your unique gift, is just the vessel God chose to carry his message of hope. Steve's tears keep flowing, but there's a peacefulness in his face now. That's the line that really got me, Leonardo adds softly. The idea that sometimes you're just being yourself, telling stories, cracking jokes, surviving, and God is using that to save people you might never meet. The audience remains captivated, some individuals weeping openly, others holding each other's hands. Steve finally speaks, voice subdued but resolute. I always doubted whether I was good enough to talk about God or faith, he confesses. I don't always walk the straight and narrow. Leonardo's expression is compassionate. Who does? He says. That's what makes your voice so essential. You're real, you're human, and you trust enough to share it. That transparency is what saved me. The tears rolling down Steve's face have shifted from sorrow to a kind of release, maybe even joy. He exhales, and his next words are spoken quietly. I'm not sure how to repay you for telling me this. Leonardo offers a faint smile. You already did, he whispers, years ago. This is just me returning the favor. A wave of raw emotion traverses the crowd. Steve glances at the crucifix again, as though seeing it for the first time. He touches it gently, then looks Leonardo in the eye. You said you have something to tell me, something that might change my life. Leonardo nods, that quiet certainty returning to his expression. Yes, he says, and those words came, in part, from you. They changed my life first. I believe they might do the same for you. The hush envelops them once again, that shared sacredness re-emerging as if the conversation itself has transcended the context of a talk show. Steve braces himself, brimming with a sense of expectancy and perhaps a newfound humility. Leonardo leans forward. You once said, sometimes you're not just talking, you're testifying. And sometimes you think you're being rescued, but you're really the one doing the rescuing. God doesn't waste any pain if you give it to him. Steve's breath catches. I remember those words, he chokes out. Leonardo's reply is soft. And I remember how they saved me. The camera zooms in, capturing the intensity on both men's faces. Nobody in the room stirs, not the crew, not the audience. It's as though they've all realized they're witnessing a transformation in real time. Steve, Leonardo says carefully, the way you handle that crucifix around your neck, it's more than a personal emblem. It's a signal, a banner. Tonight, it's pointing to something bigger than the two of us. Steve remains silent, tears still shimmering in his eyes, his hand absent-mindedly rubbing the cross. Leonardo takes another deliberate breath. I've held on to these words ever since I first heard them from you, even when I was at my lowest point. And I have to say them out loud to you because I think you might need to hear them again more than anyone else. Steve swallows, the emotion in his throat making it hard to speak. Tell me, he manages. Leonardo's gaze is unwavering. God chooses his servants in ways that don't always make sense to us, he begins. He looks for open hearts, not perfect resumes. You might feel unprepared, but that makes you all the more ready to serve, because you rely on a strength greater than yourself. Steve's lips part as he exhales a silent breath. Leonardo nods, pressing on. You once told an audience, God doesn't ask if you're qualified. He asks if you're willing, and if you are, He'll qualify you along the way. I didn't grow up in church, but I knew when I heard that, it was truth, because it resonated with a part of me that was searching for a reason to keep believing. Steve closes his eyes briefly, tears escaping again. But there's gratitude in them now, not sorrow. He uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things, Leonardo goes on. That's what you told the world, and you lived it without even trying to. You thought you were just making jokes, just getting through another gig. But God used that time and place to catch my attention when I was lost. Steve looks over at Leonardo, and in his eyes, there is an undeniable sense of awe. I don't even know what to do with all this, Steve confesses. Leonardo gives a small, understanding nod. Sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes you just have to accept it. Accept that your voice is needed. The crowd collectively releases a breath they didn't realize they were holding. Steve, feeling the moment's impact, clasps Leonardo's hand in a firm yet tender grip. "Thank you," is all he can muster, his voice trembling. Leonardo responds in kind. "No, Steve, thank you, because you might have just saved my life without ever knowing it. The least I can do is remind you who you really are." A few heartbeats pass before Steve, tears still on his cheeks, decides to stand up, turning to the audience. His voice wavers as he addresses them. "I've had countless unforgettable experiences on this stage," he starts, "but this is beyond anything I've ever encountered." He shuts his eyes, taking in the gravity, then gazes at Leonardo. "I have to do something," he says softly. Turning to the crowd once more, he lifts his microphone. "Would you all join me in prayer?" It's not the sort of question typically heard on a mainstream talk show, but no one hesitates. The atmosphere is too charged with honesty and vulnerability for anyone to resist. They bow their heads. Steve, voice unsteady yet resolute, begins. "Lord, thank you for this moment, for bringing us together to speak truth and to heal." Leonardo remains at his side, hands still resting gently on Steve's shoulder. There are no cameras cutting away, no abrupt commercial break, just raw, earnest reverence broadcast to millions. The hush feels almost tangible, like a comforting embrace around everyone present. When Steve finishes, he slowly opens his eyes, tears continuing to streak down his face. Leonardo nods solemnly, understanding the magnitude. The audience stirs, and a subdued wave of applause grows, not raucous or showy, but heartfelt. Steve turns to Leonardo. "Thank you for trusting me enough to share your story," he says, his tone low, thick with emotion. Leonardo offers a faint, tired smile, as though the telling itself took a great deal of courage. "I couldn't not tell you," he replies. "It's a weight I've carried for too long. You had a right to know what your words sparked in me." Looking around the stage, Steve's eyes land on the crucifix once again. "I always wore this as a reminder of my own journey," he confides. "Now I see it's been part of a bigger plan all along." Leonardo nods, grateful that Steve recognizes this. "Exactly," he murmurs. "What seems small to us can be life-altering to someone else." Steve's composure wavers again, but he breathes, lifting his head high as though a burden has been lifted. He turns back to the audience. "I thought tonight would be just another show," he says quietly. "But it turned into a testimony, not just mine, ours." Leonardo softly squeezes Steve's arm in agreement. "And the world got to witness it," he remarks. "Sometimes that's the best kind of testimony, the honest, unplanned kind." Slowly, the crowd stands. This time, their applause rises in unison, not the deafening roar of entertainment, but a resonant, soul-stirring tribute. They're applauding two men, and more importantly, the truth they shared. Steve and Leonardo both rise, turning to face them. There are tears and smiles all across the studio audience. In that vulnerable energy, it seems everyone believes again. Believes in faith, in hope, in unexpected intersections of lives. The final camera shot is of the two men, side by side, with Steve's tear-streaked face and Leonardo's calm, relieved expression, both visibly moved. In that luminous moment, before the show closes, before lights go up, before real life beckons them back, two men who had endured deep pain have become instruments of healing, and for a brief shining space in time, the world allows itself to hope again.